So a wonderful, warm welcome to everybody, and especially to our wonderful Sangha that you can see arrayed here, hopefully, on the screen. If you've got a grid view, that's the one to have, where you'll be able to see all of the venerables. So, you know, it's been a very auspicious time at the moment. Yesterday was the first wheel turning day. And it's so the anniversary of the first teaching of the Buddha, and it's also internationally for the FPMT International Sangha Day. And so I'm not sure, I hope everybody had a chance to join the incredible Heart Sutra-a-thon yesterday, internationally on YouTube from Sangha members all over the world, reading the Heart Sutra together and telling little bits of stories about their life. So incredibly moving, and so wonderful to see all of these Sangha up close. And now we get to see our very own Langri Tangpa Centre Sangha up close. So just as an introduction, 2,500 years ago, the Buddha formed the Sangha community of monks and nuns. Depending on support from the lay community, they studied and meditated in order to teach the Dharma. So the founder of the FPMT, Lama Thupten Yeshi, formed the IMI, International Mahayana Institute, to ensure the continuation of this tradition by Westerners in the West. Today, few of us are able to devote all of our time to religious practice as members of the Sangha, but it's vital that some do. The Buddha said, "Wherever there is a monk or nun observing the Vinaya, that place is luminous and radiant. I see that place as not empty, and I myself abide there peacefully." So we are so incredibly fortunate to have Sangha members here in the West and at Langri Tangpa Centre. So hopefully everybody can see who's here today. We have next to me Venerable Lassam. We have Venerable Trinley with the rainbow halo manifesting behind her there. Venerable Seton at home with her beautiful altar. Venerable Gompo, sturdy and strong in the middle there. And Venerable Trezom, who I can see now. How fantastic. So welcome all of you. I thought what we would start with, I've got a little screen share that I thought is quite a nice thing to start with, of a picture from November last year, which seems like an age because it was pre-COVID times. And this is in Adelaide at the Guru Bunsong incredible event, which was probably the last big Dharma event in Australia before COVID hit. And so this is just a small portion of the Queensland Sangha. So not just the Australian Sangha, but the Queensland Sangha, and I think everybody else, the lay people from Queensland, all in this photo. So such a huge amount of Sangha members. It's like a real Dharma celebration in southeast Queensland, and then all of these people managed to go down to Adelaide for this incredible event. So Geshe Saltram in the middle there. So our wonderful Sangha, and then I thought I'd start with Venerable Lassam actually, and so
I'm not there.
Venerable. This was the Queensland contingent at Guru Bunsong. So with Venerable Trinley there in the middle. And now I've got some, instead of baby photos, we have some before and after photographs. So can you recognise this lady here on the right? This is a photo from 1997. And there's my mother there just before she died when she was getting quite sick with lung cancer. And here, the before photo for, you guessed it, our very own Venerable Lassam. So Inta and Venerable Lassam were really good friends, kind of besties, and Venerable Lassam would make sure that whenever His Holiness the Dalai Lama came to came to town that they both got to get there, and in her eccentric way of planning travel and things, luckily Venerable Lassam was around to make sure that they all arrived with tickets. So Venerable Lassam, when did you know when you wanted to become ordained?
Well, you know how sometimes things just fall into your head whether you planned them or not. So I was actually in Hong Kong, and I'd gone over there for a conference in relation to work. And the only quiet place in Hong Kong was in the various temples and things, which I wanted to see anyway. And so it was in 1985. And so I was wandering, and I was just watching a nun in one of the temples really mindfully sweeping a path, and it just fell into my head that if I lived long enough, it would be a good thing for me to become ordained. So I was very pleased about the if I lived long enough, because I had no capacity to do it at that time, and I had no heart connection to any particular tradition. It was before I met this tradition. So I hadn't found a teacher or anything like that. So sometimes really weird things fall into your head, and sometimes really useful things.
And then how long did it take then for it to kind of come to fruition, that thought?
15 years.
Right.
So I'm glad it wasn't like you should do it now, because then I would have started worrying about it.
And so then a day in the life of you, Venerable, as a nun now?
Well, most of this year, as most of you know, I've been down here, but I have actually started getting back to spending about 2 or 3 days a week up at Chenrezig now, mainly because I can now travel and see Chittamani clients. For a long while, we weren't seeing the hospice clients very much at all, because it wasn't, you know, there was a risk, but now, and so I was just talking with people on the phone, but now I've started travelling, and so I guess my days are quite different depending on how much travelling I'm going to do on that day, and what pujas are on and things like that.
So do you get to, what's the ratio of like helping the human beings and being able to be a quiet contemplative?
Well, I've got a mind, like, you know, that monkey mind they talk about, so it's probably as well I don't devote too much time to being quietly contemplative. In retreat, I've sometimes found a much more peaceful state of mind, but it takes a while to get there. So I mean, I've got a certain number of prayers and practices that I do, and that's really a good thing. That's a very beneficial thing for me. And but I can't do things at a set time. There are some people who have very well organised lives and can at a very set time do this and this and this, but there are things that happen in the day, but the time's often very varied.
So I know you're being quite humble there, Venerable, because like I know even at Chenrezig Institute when you're living there that you're kind of like the go-to nun. And, you know, like if anyone rings up and needs someone to talk to on the phone, then it's Venerable Lassam. And if they need someone to fill in to lead meditation, then it's Venerable Lassam. And if there's someone that's come up to the cafe and needs some help, it's Venerable Lassam. And someone who needs to be visited who's dying is Venerable Lassam.
Well, only sometimes. I mean, if I'm there, of course, but I'm not always, none of us are always available, but yeah. I have to do something useful with this end of my life. I sometimes think there are people my age that, and I potentially would have been one of them, that with nothing much to do, so go to the pokies, give money to rich people through just have you know, gossip about the neighbours or the neighbour's dog barking, or, you know, it's really wonderful to have something that so focuses my attention that there's always something I can do in relation to Dharma activities, whether it's my own personal practice or calling someone or whatever it might be, and that's a wonderful thing for someone with such a scatty-ratty mind, that it's such a focused thing.
And so you kind of, even though you live at Chenrezig Institute, for many years you're on the Langri Tangpa Centre committee, and now you've been down here during the COVID time. But like living at Chenrezig Institute in the nuns community, how important is community for the nuns?
I think it's a wonderful thing. When I first got ordained, I wasn't working with the hospice service then, and I could live there and just attend all the teachings and pujas and everything. It was really wonderful and helped me really sink into, like, there were nuns there that had been ordained for a long time and all sorts of things. Others new like me. And so it was really lovely having that wonderful example and the advice, as well as the teachings, of course, from Kensrum Shay, but just the advice on everyday things. It was a really wonderful opportunity.
And what's one thing that people might find surprising about being ordained? Something that they mightn't know?
Everyone thinks it's this nice, quiet, peaceful life where you don't have to do anything much, just sit and say mantras. It's not. It's a very busy life.
Right, you thought that you'd finally have some time, and then suddenly...
No. I'd known Kensrum Shay Geshe Tashi Sering for 8 years or something when I got ordained, and I knew very well it was hardcore study.
Right. Fantastic. And what would be the most challenging thing about being ordained?
I don't know. Compared to my previous life, my life when I was working and working in the public service and putting up with all of that, bureaucracy and whatever, it's a wonderful time of my life. So none of it's as challenging as working in the public service for 20 years. So for those of you who still work in the public service, you have my sympathy.
Okie dokie. So, well, thank you, Venerable Lassam. Now, I'm just going to see who is the next person that we've got on our screen share for our before photos. And so here we have.
Uh-huh.
Now, it's quite a wonderful photograph of Langri Tangpa Centre in the old building in Newmarket, and so there's actually several people here. There's Gary Conway, who was a monk for a while. There is I can't remember what her name was, but she's now Venerable Cherub.
Sharon Holly.
Sharon Holly, that's right. There's Jordan, very young Jordan, very young Sue, very young Jeanette, very young Jean, and here we have, whoa! I love this photo of you, Venerable Trinley.
Oh no!
So, Venerable Trinley, when she was little, before she grew up and became a nun. So, Venerable Trinley, tell me, how did you know? I'm just going to spotlight your video. How did you know when you wanted to become ordained?
There were little signs along the path, but Venerable Tubton, she became ordained in about 2002 or 2003, and I came into the centre one night and there she was in her robe, and I thought, I want to do that. And then I thought, where did that thought come from? You know, come on. And then from there, it was like, well, why can't you do that? What's stopping you? So it took me a little while to realise, yes, I could do that, and to ask Geshe-la whether he would ordain me or not. It took a good few years, probably another 2 or 3 years before I realised that I could live my life without red wine. So
now you just live your life with the red robes instead.
yeah.
Total immersion.
Yeah.
So how long did it take? What was the deciding factor that made you be able to become ordained?
I don't think there was any one real deciding factor, but there were a couple, which was my husband died, even though we were separated. That, you know, sort of, I don't think I would have considered it while he was still alive. And my son was all growing up, so it's thought, wow, what do I do with my future? What, you know, is out there for me? And then I thought, well, I could possibly be a nun. I could, you know, that if I was committed enough, if I could find that inside myself, then I could be a nun. And there was something that Lama Zopa Rinpoche said when he visited Langri Tangpa Centre. And, you know, I was all overwhelmed at meeting him. And maybe you sort of said to him, Julie wants to be a nun. And Rinpoche said, she will be a good nun. And I went, wow, if he thinks I can do it, I can do it.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I still believe that I will be a good nun one day.
And then how did your family react? How did your son react to you being a nun?
My son was very, very, very supportive. You know, he said, I don't believe in the Buddhist BS, but if that's what you want to do, that's fine. Just so long as it makes you happy. But one of my brothers told me I wasn't good enough to be a nun. So a bit of a mixed bag, but yeah, on the whole, you know, it was okay.
And so a day in the life of the nun as Venerable Trinley, what's a typical day?
Oh gosh, just like my mind, scattered and fractured and all over the place. I quite often, I start my prayers before I leave home to go to work, and then I go to work. I work 4 days a week at Karuna Hospice Services. I'm very lucky. We have a stupa in the garden there, so I circumambulate the stupa on the way into work. I am reminded day in, day out at Karuna that I work for Lama Zopa Rinpoche because we're an FPMT hospice service, and I sometimes get some of my prayers done in my lunch break. And then, you know, I work in very much an administration job, and but I do spiritual care when it's needed. And then I do look after the education, what spiritual education we do at Karuna. And then I raise home, and sometimes when the centre's open, I come to the centre, and then, you know, it's quite, in the evening, I like to relax by reading murder mysteries and and watching murder mysteries on TV. And then sometimes I will, you know, sort of finish my prayers long before bedtime, and sometimes it will be just before bedtime. So I'm very pleased to note that Lama Yeshe wasn't an early riser, and even though he said that we should be, and he learnt his bad habits from Westerners, that, you know, just so long as I get my prayers done, you know, it doesn't matter when I do them.
So, Venerable, I know before you were working at Karuna Hospice, you were working at a plumbing supply. So tell us a little bit about the challenges of like being out in a Western community.
Well, it's really extraordinary because when you have the robes on every day, it is, you know, sort of a reminder that you are one of Buddha's disciples, you're one of his soldiers in the world. And sometimes, as much as you feel that you haven't changed, essentially because you are now ordained, people around you see you very, very differently, and people you work with feel uncomfortable around you. They feel that they can't swear anymore. They feel that you're going to be judgmental. It's very, very difficult to work in robes. And just before I had that job, for about the first 6 months I was ordained, I was working in a job where I went and I changed out of my robes into lay clothes when I got to work, and changed back in my robes when before I left work. But you know, when I'm not in robes, I swear more. So it was quite a challenge for me, because wearing the robes, well, it didn't essentially change me. It was a reminder to be very mindful of my body, speech and mind.
And so what are some other things that would be most surprising, that you found the most surprising about being ordained, apart from like whether you swear more in robes or not?
Well, it's really interesting because it's been 12 years now. It's such a journey of finding out about myself, and finding what makes me tick, and finding what are my triggers. And really, I think being ordained makes, you know, sometimes we think, well, I think that, oh my gosh, you know, I am no different to what I was 12 years ago. But I can see that I've really tried really, really hard to work on myself, and to be a good soldier for the Buddha. And after all, I'm wearing the uniform, so yeah. So
Okay, so thank you very much, Venerable. Now I'd like to go to Venerable Gompo. So let me see if I can spotlight you. Here we go. Here we are. So Venerable Gompo, I'll just see if we can find a before photograph. Oh, I know.
There's one.
Here's the before photo, and here's the now. That is just spectacular. So, Venerable Gompo, you're relatively new to being ordained, and you know, it might be quite a different perspective from becoming a monk. I mean, often when women are ordained, it's a great kind of liberation, because you're kind of freed of becoming a sex object, and you can just, you know, have this huge amount of power and agency. Whereas, like, for a guy, it might be a bit of a demotion, because, like, what's it like wearing a skirt in the West?
Liberating. I love wearing a skirt. It's fantastic. I wish I could have done it years ago. Not just think of the religious part of it, but it's so comfortable. I don't know why anyone would wear trousers.
Yeah, great, awesome. And so you go to school, right? You're a teacher. Do you wear your robes to school?
I asked my principal, and she thought it might be a bit distracting for the students, so I wear plain clothes to school. I hadn't thought about walking because I've recently moved within walking distance of my school. It's about a 35-minute walk. At the moment, I'm walking to school, so I hadn't thought about walking to school and my robes getting changed there. But now that Venerable Trailer has said that, I think, I'm going to think about that. That's a good idea. So I wear lay clothes to work every day, which is a bit difficult in some ways, because I can really relate to the idea that you swear less when you're in robes, and my mind is very different when I'm in robes, and I'm much more relaxed and calm and more meditative in robes because there's a constant reminder, every movement I make, I'm reminded of my vows.
Yeah. And so if you kind of walk to school, what about if you're walking around the neighbourhood just, you know, taking a COVID breather, and do any of your school students see you in robes? What happens?
Some of them, it's been very interesting because some of them have just walked past and completely blanked me because they didn't realise who I was. They're just avoiding that strange person. Some of them have sort of stopped and gone, huh? And one student was with her mother, and they sort of walked past, and the student said to her mother, I think that's, and I said, come on, we'll go and talk to him. And she went, but I can't talk to him, he's weird. The mum dragged the daughter back and said, hey, we had a chat in robes. And I've seen several staff members sort of do a double take, going, what? And back last term when we were in lockdown, I went into school in robes for my flu shot. Oh, the beginning of this term I went in for my flu shot, and staff members looking at me in robes going, huh? And not talking to me and avoiding me and going, okay, so maybe if I went to school in robes, the kids would be okay, but the staff would have a bit of a problem with it. So it's an interesting process.
And so what was it that made you want to become ordained, Venerable Gompo?
Well, it's a long story. How much we got? So originally when I was about 10 or 12 years old, I saw a TV program on a talk called Monkey Magic, which you've got in the library there at LTC.
Monkey Magic, I know. The first time we had Monkey Magic, it was on video, and I kid you not, it was worn off. It was played that often.
Doesn't surprise me at all. But I remember back at that time really thinking about how calm the monk in that show, and I thought, I want to do something like that. And so as time went by, I sort of didn't really think about Buddhism because it wasn't really on my radar very much. But by the time I got to university, I really had that still in the back of my mind somewhere. And so I started doing karate, and I got very much into karate. And I ended up in the end of university going off to Japan to the Mecca of all karate, wonderful places. And when I got there, I found the head instructor for my style of karate wasn't a holy being. He was an ordinary being. And my disappointment was earth-shattering for me. So I went down a very hedonistic path after that, and I did look at Buddhism in Japan. A friend of mine introduced me, and I couldn't get into it. And I went a very hedonistic along different pathway until I ended up many years later living on the Sunshine Coast. And I remember driving down the highway one day and seeing this big sign across the highway, which I was quite surprised about, saying open day at Chenrezig. So I thought I'll go and drive down there and have a look. And so I had my then at the time my wife and my two very, very young children in the car, and we drove down the road to try and find Chenrezig Institute. And I couldn't find it. Kept driving and driving and driving, couldn't find it. So I went home, not finding it. And then a few months later, I decided, well, I've got to find it. So I went driving on my own and found it, and went off to Chenrezig and started going to classes there. I'm not sure, in Chenrezig. And I did the January 10-day Lamrim retreat with Cancer Appreciated Keshe Tashi Tsering. At the end of that, I thought, this is it. This is it. There's nothing else for me. This is it. And took refuge with him at that time. But I still, at the time, I was married and had two very young children. So the idea of ordaining wasn't on my radar. And not long after that, the marriage ended, and I became a single father with two children, and that sort of consumed my life. And I got to Chenrezig occasionally, and I got to, when we moved back to Brisbane, LTC sometimes, not as often as I'd like. And then last year, so 2018, my youngest child finished high school. And then last year, my school said to me, you've got too much long service leave, you have to take some. So I took term 2 off last year, which ended up having a 14-week break. And because I'd been a single father, I didn't have any money, so I couldn't go traveling or anything. So I sort of stayed home for 14 weeks. But in staying home, every day I was either at LTC doing classes, or I was up at Chenrezig doing classes. And the more I did that without having any other distraction, the happier I became. And the more I thought, this really is it. This is really what is making me happier and making my life better. And I remembered I thought I'd had probably 12, 13 years earlier of one day retiring to live at Chenrezig Institute. And that sort of started playing in my mind. This is generating in my mind. At the time, I had an ex-girlfriend who was very, very, had lots of different problems in her life. I really wanted to help her, and I couldn't. There's nothing I could do. there's nothing I can say, nothing I can do. And the thought occurred to me, I can't help her, but I really want to. And then it sort of spread out. I want to help my kids sometimes, and I can't help them. My family or my students or these other people I want to help, but I can't do it. What can I do? What can I do? And I thought, well, actually, you know, if I listen to the teachings and become a Buddha, I can help them. I should do that. And that for me, that was the bodhicitta teachings finally sinking in after all those years. So I thought, this is what I've got to do. I've got to try and do this. What can I do to hasten that? And I thought, well, maybe when I retire, I could become a monk and go and live at Chiang Rizig when I retire. That's possibly what I could do. So I asked Khyentse Rinpoche, Ishite Sering, I wrote him a request saying, I'm thinking about becoming a monk when I retire in about 15 years' time. Do you think I would be suitable? And his response was, why are you waiting? And I said, but I've got 2 children I have to take care of. I have to keep working. I can't wear robes to work. And he said, okay, keep working. Don't wear robes to work. Why are you waiting? I said, thank you, Rinpoche. So he then, and it's very interesting because the process from there was quite quick, only a few months.
Yeah, it's quite different for many people, whether it takes a long time or a short time. So tell me, I'm interested, what's the meaning of your name, Venerable? Because doesn't it tie into being a karate expert in the past?
I remember when at the end of that first Lama retreat, when I took refuge with Rinpoche, Khyentse Rinpoche, he handed me my little refuge booklet and looked at the name and went, oh yeah, that's you. There you go. Lozang Gompo. So Lozang means wisdom and Gompo means protector.
Very fitting.
So protector with wisdom. So yes. So questions come up. Who took care of
who took care of the children? When
me? So I ordained in October last year. My son and daughter were still living with me, but my son was 20 and my daughter was 18. So in December, my son moved out, and my daughter still lives with me. So you might have seen her pass behind me at one point. She still lives with me, so I still take care of my daughter financially. She's 19 now, so she's pretty much independent, but I still provide her food and a place to sleep sometimes.
And so then tell me something that people may not know about being ordained, or something surprising about being ordained that you weren't expecting.
I recently, January this year, moved to just on the Fortitude Valley edge of New Farm. And so I go for walks occasionally around this area, and there's a wide range of different people that live in this area. And I'm surprised how often people come up to me and say, are you a Buddha? And I sort of go, I'm Buddhist. I want to be a Buddha, but I'm not there yet. And they go, what does that mean? I thought you look like a Buddha. I go, thank you. Is it hairdo?
Lovely. Lovely.
So that's what's most surprising for me is that sort of people's reaction.
Yep, I've heard that often too, that from various nuns going shopping in Carindale or wherever. And one time when I was out with Annie Marg, before she passed away, and we were just waiting for a train, and so someone just randomly came up to her and said, how's the Dalai Lama? Say hello to him for me. And she's like, I'll say hello for you, thank you very much.
I had a woman come up to me in Woolies and say, do you go to India much? And I said, I've never been, but I want to go one day. He said, I've got some stuff I want to give to Dalai Lama, and I need to find somebody to give it to him. I'm sorry, I'm not going to India in the near future.
You just say, yes, okay, sure.
So questions come up in the chat. My children weren't young when I got ordained. They were 18 and 20. So I didn't have young children and that's one of the reasons I wasn't thinking about being ordained when I had young children. I thought I had that responsibility that I felt I couldn't have both of those at the same time. So when my children were finally old enough to be off my hands almost, that's when I ordained.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to go to Venerable Seton. So let's see, I'll just bring you up on the video there. So Venerable Seton, tell me, what was it that made you want to become ordained? And how many years ago was it that you became ordained?
Oh, it's coming up for 7 now. Yeah, in a couple of months' time, it'll be 7 years. Very, very much like both Venerable Lassam and Venerable Trinley, actually. It wasn't particularly on my mind, but it was, you had at Langri Tangpa, there was a Meet the Nuns afternoon, probably about 9 years ago now. Venerable Pema was there as well. And I was teaching that morning at Chung Tien Temple, actually, and I left, instead of staying for lunch, I rushed off and rushed to Langri Tangpa, but I didn't know why. I just needed to, I was compelled to be there for that session. And in fact, I was quite new to Langri Tangpa at the time, but I really had to be there. So anyway, I rushed off, abandoned everybody and came up there. And halfway through that gathering, when the nuns were talking, I think I burst into tears. Venerable Trinley, I remember very clearly, and and I just said I have to be there. It wasn't a decision to make, and it was a big shock to me. I had no idea where that thought came from. It's strange, isn't it? And later on, a few people said to me, "Gosh, you were very slow in seeing that coming," and I hadn't seen it coming at all. But some people had, that I'd known for quite some time, had thought for a while that maybe I would do that. So.
And then from making that or recognising that kind of aspiration, then how long did it take for you to become ordained?
It took about 18 to 20 months, I think. I was trying to think back about that just now. I actually wrote the very next day to Ken Rinpoche, then as he was, and requested ordination. I actually had never met Ken Rinpoche, so I was guided on that path, and he accepted me straight away. There was nothing. I was already studying at uni down at in New South Wales. I was studying Buddhism at university, and he accepted me immediately. But then he kept on going out of the country, and no one ever knew when he was going to be back. So I was told to prepare, be ready for whenever, and then I had to wait 18 months, which was a really long 18 months.
And then, Venerable, I know when you first became ordained, you had quite a few challenges. You fell over and broke some bones and had a whole lot of really severe kind of challenges straight away, like as becoming ordained. So how did you get through those challenges?
How did I get through them? I don't know. I had an enormous patience that I had never had before. I think I'd been ordained not long, had I? I can't think how long. It wasn't very long. The others might remember better. And I fell over. I just tripped up and really did a lot of damage, as you know, and was off my feet for a long time, actually. So.
Because I often hear this happens, that sometimes when people become ordained, like a whole lot of karma ripens straight away. And I remember that kind of happening to you. And you know, just like as a big challenge of being ordained and then having all of this kind of upon you.
It was, and there was huge support. I can remember turning up at Langri Tangpa one day, I think an open day, some months later, and I was still a real mess. I couldn't dress myself, and I had to have a great deal of help. I got a taxi up there, and Geshe Sering was there, and he said to me, "It doesn't matter what you look like. I obviously looked a wreck. I've been wrapped in these robes." And my neighbour used to come in and she said, "I never thought in this life I'd learn to dress a Buddhist nun," she said. And I couldn't manage without her. She was just extraordinary. And I turned up at Langri Tangpa, and he'd gone off. And Yaki brought him back in the car, and he came up to me and he said, "It doesn't matter what you look like. It just, as long as you're wearing maroon, just wear what you can and do what you can." And that was just wonderful, really. Just lovely.
And so then what about now? What's a typical day in Venerable Seton's life?
Oh, it's pretty full. As Lassam said, you can't believe how busy it is being ordained. I had never thought at my age that I'd be working full-time or more, and so involved with an area that I never thought I'd ever be involved. I was a midwife all my working life until I retired, an age retirement. And now I'm deeply involved in teaching Buddhism. And that's extraordinary, but it's led me to all sorts of other things. Yesterday morning, I spent the whole morning at Parliament House meeting with politicians and representing Buddhism and Buddhist education in schools at that level. And I had never thought I'd know so much about education, and I certainly didn't think I'd ever know so much about education in Queensland as I do, and being invited to teach at Buddhist schools abroad as well, and that sort of thing. So I am very busy. Yeah.
So there is a question here from Jan about just a general one of like, you're allowed to work while following Buddhism. So this kind of brings up one of these difficulties of being Sangha in the West, because being a renunciate or a vow holder, then you're not supposed to handle money. But here we are in Australia where it's actually illegal to beg. So, and how do you kind of negotiate that? So there's always this challenge, of course, for the Sangha of how to financially support yourselves, because it's not like there is for the Western Sangha in our organisation. It's kind of not like the Asian centres where they're supported by the community. So it's quite a challenge. So with the work that you do, how are you able to support yourself financially?
Well, all my work is volunteer in any case. So I help run the Buddhist education services, and that's everyone who works for BESS is a volunteer. But I have a pension. I have two pensions, one from here and one from home, the UK, and I live on my pensions. So my work is all volunteer work, and it's all Dharma work, deeply Dharma work. Every day, every moment of every day is deeply immersed in the Dharma. Research for lessons, seeing how I can keep education, Buddhist education or RI generally going in schools, and yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So now I'd like to go to Venerable Chazom, and I'll just get your video up. Here we are. So Venerable Chazom, you too have to go out and work, don't you? So how do you find that? How do you negotiate that? And do you wear your robes to work?
So I'm not able to wear my robes to work. I work at a childcare centre, which is they would get dirty very quickly. So yeah, it's interesting navigating the world, like knowing, like in my mind I'm like, yes, I'm ordained, but then you go to work and you're wearing lay clothes and I wear a work uniform. We have a uniform at work, and it is interesting because sometimes it's like some people at work, like they know that I'm ordained, but sometimes they might forget, and they might go, oh, we're going to do like this for a work party. I'm like, oh, I can't really do that. But maybe we could do something else so everyone can be included. But yeah, it's just interesting. But I get like quite a positive response as well. I haven't really had too many negative responses to being ordained, even at work, and even like there are times when I get changed at work to go to classes before COVID, and I've even parents say, they just like keep walking past, and yeah, it's interesting. Some people have questions and some people don't really notice or like don't really have any questions. It's interesting.
Did it change your relationships with the people at work?
Not really. No. I'm very open about, like I say to people, like I'm happy to, if you have a question, I'm happy to see if I can answer it, and people just come up with questions, and I'm happy to talk about, I mean, in the education, like childcare sector, we do a lot with making sure that we make the children feel secure, and we talk about emotions and those sorts of things. So I'm always very like mindful of how I act and what I do, so that I'm making sure that I am working in a way that benefits the children, so that they can learn and enjoy and engage. Yeah.
So I've got another question from Jan, which is a great one for you, because she's asking, do you put your family to one side and not associate with them? So this kind of leads me to asking you, Venerable Chazom, how did you come to be ordained, and even how did you meet the Dharma?
Well, yeah, so my mum brought me to the Dharma. She's always been interested in, those in different religions and things like that. And it's funny, when I was younger, I found it hard to sleep at night. And so she would get guided meditations and put them on to help me get to sleep. So I was introduced to meditation at a young age, and I kind of gravitated towards it because I'm a bit of a contemplative person. I kind of just sit and think and analyze things a lot. So yeah, it just, and so she and another friend who's quite spiritual, they went to a teaching by Lama Zopa quite a few years ago. And then in her email, something else popped up, and she was like, oh, let's go see this Geshe talk. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's go. And everything, we were just sat there going, where can we get more of this information? It was amazing, just very useful information to help you live a better life and be able to engage with, because we come there's a lot of suffering that happens in life, and you see it, and how do you deal with it? Like, no one's ever said to me like, oh, do this might help, or do this and this might help. And he was just laying out so many different ways of being able to manage stresses in your life. And so we found LTC and started going to LTC, and I just love the teachings, and I love studying and researching, learning new things, and doing.
How old were you, Venerable Chezon, when you came?
So I was when I first went to LTC. I was partway through my speech pathology degree that I did at uni. I would have been like 19, or it would have been about 19, 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm quite young, I guess, compared to.
What made you take the giant leap into robes?
Well, I'd always seen I always want to help people, and so I've always been looking for what is the thing I can do so I can best help others. And when I got into learning more about Buddhism, and I saw nuns and monks and other people who are ordained and really immersed in Dharma practice, and I just imagined myself as if I lived to an old age, I'm like, I want to teach and help others. And I was like, well, I could be a nun. I was like, why wait when I can do it now? And Khench Rinpoche, he's here in Australia now, and you don't know how long you're going to live for and anyone else is going to live for. So I was like, the opportunity is here. I'll just take it. And I took refuge with Rinpoche. I had talked to Pema a bit about wanting to be ordained, and I took teachings from Khench Rinpoche for about a year before I decided to asked to take refuge. And then at the refuge ceremony, Tsering said that it would be a good opportunity to ask him to be ordained, and so I did, and he was like, yes, with thumbs up. And so it happened quite quickly.
Right. And so then, as a young nun in Brisbane, how do you find a Sangha community? How important is community to you? It's
really important. I'm also I'm very social, and I like to socialize and learn about others, and it's awesome. Like, I live with another nun as well, Pamo, so which is awesome, and I ask her lots of questions. But it's so important to have other people around you who are doing something similar to what you're doing, so that you feel connected, and it helps you to maintain that connection with your like-minded people. Yeah.
And so what was something that you found surprising about becoming ordained, or that people may not know about becoming ordained?
I've been thinking about this one. I'm like, I don't know. The thing that I found really funny, and I don't know if it's because I'm ordained or not, but there are certain things that I've gone like, oh, I need this thing, and then someone's gone, oh, I'm looking for a home for this thing. I'm like, oh, I'll have it. Like, for example, my altar behind me, some students at TKSL, they didn't need the table anymore, and Pen was like, oh, do you need this? I was like, actually, I do need a altar. So it's funny, some things have just sort of slotted into place in like just like very nice ways. It's really funny like that. Yeah.
Isn't there a saying about that, of that wherever the Sangha are, that the Buddha promised they would never go hungry or go without?
Yeah, I have heard. Yes, yeah. So, you know, every now and then little things come into your life, and yeah, it's nice.
And so Jan's asking, so can you see your family?
Yeah, I see them very often. They live not far from where I live. And before I moved out with another nun, I used to live with them. But yeah, I see them all the time. And Mum, I'm going to do some study tomorrow with Mum. So like we study together, and we.
So you're quite a Dharma family, actually, because your family comes to Langri Tangpa Centre. So in a way, you're like one of the children that were influenced by their parents.
Yeah. And I also think like the body that I've taken in this life, it was just, you know, there was something that ripening at that point where I was ready to, you know, take ordination and live this life, and I had the perfect family that were very supportive. So yeah,
really lucky. So thank you very much, Venerable Chozom. Now I wanted to just show another little bit of a screen share with just a few more photos. So here is one Venerable Trinley in her previous life as Julie Costello, but also previous life Robbie, who is now Venerable Dondrup. And many of you might know from being the incredible, putting his hand up to be the incredible organiser for the Bendigo retreat until it was cancelled because of COVID. And so, you know, Venerable Dondrup, I think for many years lived almost as a renunciate, and then it was such a natural fit then for him to become ordained. Venerable Trinley, you had something you were just telling me before about, oh no, it was Delma, that's right. So Venerable Dondrup was saying when being the organiser for the Bendigo retreat, you know, a huge amount of many months of preparation, even when it was cancelled, you know, just like 1 week beforehand because of COVID. And Venerable Dondrup was saying if he just would set his motivation every morning and remember he's working for Lama Zopa Rinpoche and for all the Buddhas, and then everything would just fall into place and the problems would dissolve daily like that. Which is a pretty amazing thing to say, because that's one of the most challenging jobs, to organise a retreat like that. Anyway, so I don't have an after photo of Venerable Dondrup, but he did start off here at Langri Tangpa Centre and now is in the maroon colours. And then we've got this picture of Venerable Pema when she was Samara. And so there's this photograph here was taken at Chenrezig Institute. So Venerable Pema this was during the 8 Nyungnays in a row. And so Venerable Pema was the youngest one doing the Nyungnays. She was like 18 or 19. And Alice next to her was the oldest one doing the Nyungnays, and she was 80 something. And they both did all 8 Nyungnays in a row, and they were both like dynamos. You couldn't stop them. So this photograph, the old and the young, how many decades between them? So Alice has since died, but she in the last few years of her life would get up at 4 a.m. every morning and join a walking group of 3 other elderly ladies where they'd walk and then sit and meditate in Cleveland. And when she died, the elderly ladies came to pick her up for their walk and meditation session, and she just kind of basically died in meditation. And she was unstoppable Dharma practitioner, just like into everything. You'd swear she was 20, even though she was 80 something or other. And then Venerable Pema Samara begged and begged and begged to become ordained. For so many years she would ask Geshe Tashi Sering, can I please become ordained? And he'd say, how are you going to support yourself? And so, you know, she did a nursing degree so she could support herself. And then she'd beg again, please, please, can I become ordained? And he'd go, no, you've got to make more merit. You need more merit to become ordained. So she would do retreats and donate books and all sorts of things. And then at the end of this Nyungne, she asked Geshe Tashi Sering, she said, Geshe-la, you know, I've been asking to be ordained almost for longer than I've been alive. You're like, please, please. So this photo here was like on a, instead of like having a hen's party, we had a night out before she became ordained and went off to some concert as our last samsaric kind of event. The band that we went to see was called The Disturbed, which is quite fitting really for a last night in samsara. And then it was like, see you later, samsara, and here comes ordination. So, and then this photograph here, so this was the 2019 Nyungne at Langri Tangpa Centre. And so there's, you may notice a few before photos in here. If you cast your eye, there's Venerable Chosam inching towards ordination there. Like getting the hairdo almost. And over here, Venerable Gompo. And Naomi, a year younger than now, who's growing up very quickly. And over here, Cheryl, who also became ordained. So in this year, in 2019, there are actually 4 people from Langri Tangpa Centre who became ordained. And this lady here, Han, I think her name is, she, Hong, she said, wow, that was a real dynamite Nyungne, because look what happened out of it. So this kind of leads me to one of my other questions that I wanted to ask some of you venerables, and I might go to you, Venerable Trinley, because, you know, with becoming ordained, many times, you know, when people request, the Lamas will say, no, you don't have the merit yet, you don't have the merit yet, because you need so much a store of merit, not just to become ordained, but to be able to stay ordained. So even with those, you know, 4 people that became ordained at Langri Tangpa Centre, Cheryl has since disrobed. So tell me, what are some of those big challenges of why do people disrobe in the West?
Well, first, you know, there's no, you know, you accumulate great merit through having the aspiration to ordain. You accumulate great merit through ordaining. And sometimes, Khensa Rinpoche has said, you know, you might have the merit to become ordained, but you don't have the merit to stay ordained. And, you know, there have been many, many nuns and monks who have disrobed. And it's not like in, say, Catholicism, where when a nun or a priest gives back their vows, they're excommunicated from the church. You know, people who disrobe can continue to study the Dharma, can continue to be a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful practitioner. But that, you know, one of the challenges, I think, to staying ordained is our own mind. You know, just because we are ordained, it doesn't mean the minute we ordain that we become a Buddha. We're still the same. Our mind is still the same, and we have to keep working on our mind. And I think for some people, you know, there's the external challenges. They might get sick, or their family might get sick, or you know, all sorts of those samsaric challenges that face people, and they might feel that it's more difficult for them to remain ordained and tackle all of these challenges in their life at the same time. But it's also the challenges of our mind, because as human beings, we want to be happy. And, you know, being ordained, I think, for most of us, brings great joy every day and great happiness. But sometimes that happiness fades for some people in robes, and they can't seem to find that happiness, that joy anymore. So they look to move on to something else that will make them happy. They can't see the bigger picture anymore. They can't see that the whole point in ordaining and remaining ordained is to help others and to renounce samsara and to quickly become enlightened for the sake of others. And sometimes through, their own minds, they lose sight of the big picture. And I think that's easy to do for some, for all of us, and we really, really have to work on that, work on our minds so that we can remain ordained.
Yeah, and especially because, in the West it's quite difficult because living within a Sangha community, it's quite challenging to create that kind of community if you're not living in a monastery. And it was interesting how yesterday in the IMI Sutra-a-thon, how Venerable Joan said that, Lama Zopa Rinpoche just recently said quite specifically for the Sangha to try and spend 1 month each year in a monastery or nunnery. And so Rinpoche hasn't kind of come out and said that so specifically before, not necessarily doing retreat or even necessarily going to teachings, but just being in that atmosphere amongst other monks and nuns. So, it becomes totally normal and you get that support and possibly that joy and kind of the energy of being in that group. Yes. So what would be advice that you would give someone, Venerable, if they were thinking of becoming ordained? What kind of advice would you give them?
I think to look at the reasons why they want to become ordained. Khyentse Rinpoche, in my interview with him, when I asked to be ordained, he asked me what I thought renunciation was. And he wanted to know very clearly whether renunciation, I think, was one of the reasons for becoming ordained. But to, make aspirational prayers. If you think, oh, maybe, and well, what if, and it's there in your mind, as I said, great merit is accumulated, but if you really, really, really want it to happen, make aspirational prayers and, do all of the things that you would do for a worldly goal, sort of set the goal and work towards it and talk to other monks and nuns and find out firsthand the challenges. There's some great books in the LTC library. But importantly is the aspirational prayers, I think. Make very, very strong prayers. And they'll come to fruition.
Oh, good.
And that's the advice Venerable Robina gave me when I asked her about it when I was considering it. She just said, make aspirational prayers. So.
And so then, Venerable Lassam, I wanted to ask you about that too. So if you, what kind of advice you would give to people if they, express an interest about becoming ordained, what would you say are the first steps?
It's quite tricky because sometimes I literally was walking down the street one day and a woman was having an argument with her boyfriend and said, well, she saw me and said, well, maybe I should just become a nun. Which I just had to keep walking because that's not a base. Having an argument with your boyfriend is not a basis for becoming ordained. But sometimes people are, it's not something they've really thought through. It's just something that seems like a good idea. It's not quite as short-sighted as that may be. And I think people need to have a really good understanding of the Buddhist teachings, to have some understanding of what that is about and what particularly, sometimes people think this is a good idea and they don't even yet clearly understand the 10 non-virtues and the 10 virtues and things like that. So they haven't really, one lady told me she'd get ordained except that you know, she'd have to give up smoking, and she couldn't do that. So it wasn't really a thought about what she could do as an ordained person. It was about my addiction that I can't give up. And so, you know, if people have that sort of, at that level, it's really just, they want something, as Venerable Trinley said, they want something that will make them happy, and giving up smoking won't make me happy, so I won't do it. So it depends. If someone's at that level of understanding, then of course they have to study and that sort of thing. And if people have really got a clear understanding, then, you know, it's really worthwhile for them to contemplate, well, you know, how would I live my life? And because in the West, how would I support myself? And so Khensa Rinpoche asked me this, and I know has asked other monks and nuns, how will you support yourself? And Venerable Pema, the one who is very young that Miffi was showing the photo of as she came out at the end of Nungne with the older lady, when she first had a very good idea, she was in Canberra, and so she zipped up here and she went and asked Geshe Tashi, staring as he was then, and when he said, so how will you support yourself, she was just like mind blown away, because it hadn't occurred to her that she would have to do that. And that's what, she hadn't completed grade 12, so she had to complete grade 12, and then she had to come to her nursing. And so this is why it took so long for her to actually have, you know, a guaranteed way of supporting herself. So these are things that would normally be asked in traditional monasteries and nunneries, because they're supported by the surrounding population.
And so, Venerable, you know, you occasionally live at Chenrezig Institute, officially live at Chenrezig Institute, even though you're very kindly looking after Langri Tangpa Centre at the moment. But is it possible for people who are interested in ordination to spend some time in the nuns community, or is there kind of a way of having a try before you buy, you know, like people do that when they think about having a baby, perhaps, you know, go and look after a baby for 2 weeks and see how that goes. So is there an opportunity for lay people to do that?
Certainly lay people can come and live at Chenrezig Institute, and they can do all the practices with the nuns and things like that in the Gompa, and talk to the nuns and do the study program and things like that. They can't, the rules of Chenrezig nuns community and the accommodation that the community owns is, if people have approval for ordination, then they can live there in pre-ordination. But generally, there's not a lot of spare accommodation. Sometimes there is, it just depends. But it's not really that they live in the nuns' physical community, but certainly they can come and live at Chenrezig. And people often do that, and are in the Gompa whenever the nuns are in there, and you know, find out that way the things that the community does. And you know, they'll often be very kind and help with doing things that, you know, doing the water bowls, helping with cleaning the Gompa, helping with shopping, all these different things. That help them get an understanding of what life is like living in the nuns community, and also, you know, creating merit, as Venerable Trinley said, helping the Sangha, helping with preparing for pujas and things like this. So creating merit in this way as well.
Thank you.
Miffi, can I say something?
Yes, I was just going to go to you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it. Yep.
I was just going to say, it's quite interesting that this has come up about preparing to be a nun. I personally was, because it was such a shock to me that that's what I needed to do. I can't say I wanted to do it. I needed to do it, as I said. But I wanted to be a good nun. And I guess that we all want to be a good monastic, but we don't know how or why or what. But I happened to know somebody when I was studying at uni who knew Venerable Thubten Chodron at Shrivasti Abbey. And I couldn't go and stay at Chenrezig at that time anyway. I was quite busy studying. So she arranged for me and with me to go to Shrivasti Abbey to do their, they have a course there every year. I think they have two, one for younger people and then a general one, on how to be a monastic and what does it mean to be a monastic. And I went there for 5 weeks and stayed there. In fact, stayed a little bit longer. I couldn't stay very long, but I stayed a little bit longer. And they go through the whole thing about what the Vinaya says about being a monastic, what it actually means, what it's like and what's expected of you when you're wearing the robes and so on. And I found that the most incredible help. And then the nuns up at CI, where I used to go every spare moment before and after that as well. And it really is important to know what is expected, what the Vinaya says, if possible, about that sort of thing, because it's a good foundation, I think, for stability in your life as a monastic.
And so would that be your kind of advice if someone was interested in becoming ordained? What would be, a handy hint for them?
Well, I think it was extremely difficult to get to Shrivasti, even when there was no COVID, because that was 8 years ago. It is a long way away, but it is one of the only, in fact, I think in the West, it's the only place that offers that sort of course in any case. So, and I was determined to go there, so I made that possible. It probably won't be possible for the future. I think that to certainly live with a monastic community in some way, and Chenrezig is our nearest one, of course, is invaluable. It cannot be overemphasized how important it is to have that support and to find out even how to wear the robes. You don't learn that really. Venerable, can you tell a funny story about that? After I sewed myself into them the night after I took vows, because I wasn't sure I could fold them again if I went back to Langri Tangpa the following morning. Venerable Lassam was horrified and rescued me, but it was they didn't fall off and they never will. But it's, they're little things that you just don't know really. And it can destabilize you. Things can catch you unawares, I think. So I would always recommend that you look at it carefully and have perhaps some background knowledge of generally the Vinaya as well. Not hugely, because it's big, but just generally what's expected, what the Buddha expected as well.
Mm.
So yes, Venerable Gompo, let's go to you. I'll just spotlight the video. Yes, go for it.
Thank you. I think the example that Venerable Lassam gave about the woman saying that maybe I become a nun because she was running away from something is a good one, because if someone considers ordination, are they running away from something or towards something? So in a way, ordination is a little bit like getting married, where the ceremony itself, people put a big emphasis on in the actual life. If I get ordained, that one day is going to be wonderful, but it's actually a lifelong commitment. So is ordination going to help you achieve your long-term goals? And it's going to be, yes, there are going to be, as with everything, challenges along the way. But if you can see a clear goal that you're working towards, and that ordination will speed you along the way or assist you in that goal, it's going to be much easier to maintain ordination in the long term, I think. And that's probably something to consider, not just the becoming ordained, but the maintaining ordination, maintaining the vows, because it's going to be a clear benefit to keep you on that goal, the long-term goal. That's probably one thing I would think of to consider.
And also coming back to this idea of a sense of a monastic community. So living in the city, how have you found, how do you create that sense of a monastic community or a community of monks? Do you have that sense, or where do you find that community or support?
I don't have that community support of monks. Nuns is really interesting. And this is very common in the West, apparently, that there are many more nuns than monks. And I think it's probably in Western society much more socially acceptable to be a spiritual person as a woman than it is as a man. So I feel a great connection to Chenrezig. That's where I first took refuge as well, and the community up there. So I get up there whenever I can. And the nuns that we have here and other nuns that we get together and have afternoon tea is very important. Interestingly enough, since lockdown and places like LTC and Chenrezig and other places are doing a lot more online and YouTube type teachings, that has made me feel much, much more connected. So when we first went into lockdown, everyone was worrying about being so isolated and alone. I felt so much more connected because every time I got up in the morning and put my robes on, I knew not only was I a member of the community simply by putting my robes on, it also gave me a direct connection back through the centuries to Shakyamuni Buddha. So putting the robes on every morning in isolation made me feel less isolated. And then having all the online teachings and seeing other people in the same situation as me in robes and in different parts of the world, like the Sutrathon yesterday, made me feel I was never felt alone and isolated in isolation during lockdown, because I was part of that community, even though I was in my own home, not going out.
Yeah, I think many of us have felt like that with the COVID thing of having all of these incredible online teachings, and especially the one yesterday of just all of these monks and nuns that I've seen in various videos or seen from afar in Bendigo, but you're always too shy, and then suddenly they're right there talking just to me. It's fantastic. Really, I felt that sense of community. Yeah.
What I was also very surprised about is how many of those people we saw yesterday have either passed through or started off at Genera's Institute.
Or Langri Tangpa Centre.
Langri Tangpa Centre. Or both.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Australians are very international in that respect, like scattered all around the world. Really strong long-term Australian Sangha is quite extraordinary. Okay, so Venerable Trizom, then I would like to ask you about your advice for, say, young people to becoming ordained. What would be your things to look out for?
Yeah, I think like what has been mentioned before, definitely talking to other Sangha, talking to as many Sangha as you can and finding out about their story, asking them for advice. That's what I did. And making sure that you have a really deep think about your motivation and why you want to be ordained. Because it is a bit different being young and being ordained, because I think like in the West there is this thinking of like, oh, you might get married and have kids and blah blah blah, but you don't have to run your life like that. And people might ask you questions about like, oh, why are you doing this and not like this other thing that everyone else is doing. But I think just thinking about your motivation and talking to as many people as you can, and having a think about it.
So there's kind of a related question here from Alicia. So the thought of renunciation is quite difficult for her at the moment, as Venerable Trinley mentioned about like having to give up red wine. So what would you say are some of the things that you gain as an ordained person? So like the achieving your lifelong goals. So this is kind of the question that I wanted to wrap up with everybody. Where do you see yourself, or what are your aspirations, say, for the next 5-10 years? What are the things that you're really hoping to achieve as an ordained person?
Well, in the future I would like to learn Tibetan and do something with that, and I would love to become a teacher and teach Dharma when I'm a bit older and have more knowledge of the Dharma. So being ordained definitely helps me with that goal of being immersed in the teachings and studying them, and just that they just have there's so much that the Buddha taught that is just so useful for everyday life, and I just want to help other people, not necessarily from the religious side, but even just like in a secular way, also thinking about them like having that spiritual health. Thinking about your spiritual well-being is important too.
Yeah. And so then finally, what's the best bit about being a nun?
The best bit, I just love it. I just love the community and I just really love being ordained. It's just this feeling of like once I became ordained, I felt like I was home, like in my robes. I feel at home in my robes. Doesn't matter where I am. I'm not necessarily connected to a specific country or place, but my robes is where I'm home. Yeah.
At home with the Buddha's vow. That's really lovely. Thank you. So, Venerable Gompo, I'm going to come back to you again and ask you, so what's the best bit about being a monk?
I'd say there's two things. The first is not having to wear trousers. It's great. I like trousers. Good is good. But I think the best thing for me is finally being able to let go of things that I didn't realise I was hanging on to, and having permission to do that. So as I was preparing for ordination, my father kept saying to me, don't you just want to you can still find someone to settle down with and have a nice life with a wife. And that was very big for him, and I didn't realise that I had taken that on board most of my life, his thinking. My father was with my mother for 25 years before she died, and then a couple of years on his own, and he's now with his current wife for 30 years. So his life revolved around being with a romantic partner and making her happy. And in his mind, that's what being an adult man is. You find a romantic partner, you make them happy. And I had bought into that subconsciously. And most of my life was trying to find the right romantic partner, and it hadn't worked, clearly. And actually taking ordination meant I can finally let go of that. I can let go of this expectation that I'll do this part of my life, I'll do that in my life. I can let go of this expectation. All these expectations I had about what I was going to do with my life and what I should be doing with my life that were really causing me a lot of unhappiness and suffering, I finally had permission to let go of. And that was really one of the best things about me, about becoming ordained.
Well,
and
like
so let it go.
Renunciation, isn't it, actually?
But that's back to that question about not being able to renunciation. If you focus on what you have to give up, it's quite hard. But if you focus on what you want to achieve and you're working towards a goal, and you go, okay, that's my goal that I'm working towards, that's not necessary, then it's not so hard. Focusing on what you lose is really hard. Focusing on what you're going to gain is much easier.
And so what's the thing that you're really aspiring to at the moment that you're planning for, or as a monk?
I would like to not have to work an ordinary job every day. I would like to be, like Venerable Chisholm said, to be a full-time Dharma teacher. All my adult life I've been teaching things. I've been karate, scuba diving, high school, English as a second language, all these different things I've been teaching my whole life. So I've got some experience of actually teaching. I would like to give to other people what I have received, the Dharma teachings. And I would like to be able to do that full time if I can, but I don't know how. And that's why I'm doing my best to study as much as I can at the moment. So the more that I study, the more that I understand, the better I am often going to be when the opportunity eventually comes to be able to teach full time.
Great. Well, I'll pencil you in. I'm going to pencil both of you in to the Langri Tangpa calendar diary. Thank you. Now, Venerable Seton, how about you? Some of your kind of goals and aspirations for being a nun, what you're hoping to be able to really accomplish.
When I first became a nun, I didn't have any particular goal. I just needed to be in robes, and to study. I come probably to Buddhism in a quite academic way, in fact, through my studies at uni of Buddhism. And I just want to learn, and that's really what my whole aim was. The fact that I've now taken that to what I'm doing, obviously connected to how I became connected with the education services in schools. And that's where I see that's what my aim is, to continue doing and to keep it there and to grow it if I can.
Yep, look after the young people.
Well, to get Buddhism out there, which we're doing in slightly different ways, even with our fundraising, we've just to get, and I found when we were trying to do some fundraising for BESS, that we did a film night and we're going to do something else. And actually, it didn't matter to me. I was quite surprised. It took me quite unawares that it wasn't that bothered me, getting in some fundraising. Well, fair enough. But actually, suddenly the main aim for me was to actually get the Dharma out there to people in a way that interests everyone, whether they realise it or not, whoever they are. So it's the same in the classroom. If I have a class for children, and those children are often from cradle Buddhist families. They were born into a Buddhist family. The joy, the real joy, is if there are children in that class who are not from Buddhist families, and that their parents have seen the wisdom in actually opening those children up to other potential things out there in the world. And that's the joy of sharing Buddhism with them in a way that gives them the Dharma, sows a seed.
And what's the best bit about being a nun?
I knew you were going to say that. Every single moment of every 24 hours a day is an absolute joy being in roads. Every moment. There's no highs or lows. It's just a general joy every moment. It's my home. Lassam, you put that so beautifully. I'm home. And it was a huge relief to become ordained and to put the robes on, and I've never had to look back. It's never occurred to me, not at any point.
Fantastic, thank you. And Venerable Trinley, I'll just pin it over to you. Then tell me, for someone who's aspiring for ordination, what are the main things you'd say to find out or look out for?
Just, it's a process of learning, and a process of learning who you are and whether it will be right for you. And, you can do that through studying and through, asking lots of questions of those who are ordained. And while, we don't know whether we have very long left in this life, it's not something we should jump into without seriously considering everything. And there is, when we can travel again, there is the pre-ordination course you can do in Tashita in Dharamsala, which is recommended by His Holiness Dalai Lama. So there's ways, but even if you can't do a pre-ordination course, get up to CI as much as you can. Talk to the LTC nuns and email Sangha at Langri Tangpa Centre, and we'll answer your questions if you can't see us in person. But if you want to talk to me in person, you can always make an appointment and we can discuss. It's really, there's lots of ways, but I feel the same. I came home, I found me, and sometimes that takes a little bit of a journey. So don't be too impatient, but be focused.
Thank you very much. And so then, Venerable Lassam, where are we? Here we are. So tell me, for someone who is thinking about ordination but doesn't quite know where to start, possibly doesn't even go to a Dharma centre yet, what's the advice or the first steps to take?
Well, I think very much actually going to a Dharma centre, finding the nearest one. For some people, they've got this idea that Buddhism's something, but they're not even their idea. And I was the same myself. I was exactly the same myself early on in life. Not really, even when I came to a stage of saying I'm Buddhist, it really meant I didn't have a strong affiliation with anything else. But it was a euphemistic idea. I didn't know anything about the teachings or anything like that. It was, patience, kindness, compassion, that must be it. That's true of all spiritual traditions, would say that's how we should behave. But in my ignorance, I thought that was what Buddhism was. So, finding out what it really is. And sometimes for people, the thought of, it's like there's 101 reasons why they can't come to a Dharma centre because of childcare or work or both or whatever. But even, you can look online now, and then, you can get a mouthful of, I don't do things. Even going to a council library and getting books that are there by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, so even those as a start, just to get some idea of what the great teachers say. And then, if people are interested in that, they will continue on. And I think now, in some ways, with all the difficulty with COVID, many teachings are more accessible now. The fact that His Holiness did an initiation online, up until very recently, you had to be right there. There was no other way. These weren't recorded because you had to be there to get the, directly from the master's mouth into your ear. And so there are many things that are more available in some ways, as somehow it's turned out. But I think it is important that people start gradually and not start too impetuously into, as occasionally some people do, this Lamrim Chenmo, I'll start with that. It's got everything in it. Or as I heard someone who wanted ordination and wouldn't be satisfied, they were overseas, would not be satisfied with the beginning levels of ordination, wanted full ordination, and unfortunately within less than a year was not ordained. And so, like all these things, gradually, we don't start learning to cook by cooking something Kirsten Blumenthal did. We start with boiling eggs or whatever. We need to start gradually and gradually improve our capacity. Our understanding will come. It's just, it has to, but we have to be gentle with ourselves and not push too hard initially.
And then tell me, what's the best bit about being a nun?
Well, on a superficial way, this low maintenance hairdo.
That's right. None of the problems that I have. It's the best hairdo, it's the ultimate hairdo in the world.
I just give Miffi my clippers and say, it's too long. She spends hours doing what she does.
Oh, lovely.
Well, the best bit is there's nothing else I want to do. I don't think I'd like to do this or that. Before I was ordained, I did bits of this and that, not so much in my work maybe, but learned a bit of yoga, took a new puppy off to dog training, did a bit of this and a dash of that, and so now I don't have there's no wish to do anything else than learn and apply the Dharma teachings and hopefully, because I'm on the other end of life to Venerable Shodzam, hopefully be able to prepare my mind and do the things that the teachings say we can achieve in our death time as we go through that process. And so hopefully karma is what karma is, and hopefully I'll be able to access some good karma at that time and make use of that as well.
So, look, thank you very much, everybody, for all you wonderful Sangha, for sharing your stories with us and answering some wild and woolly questions, and really illuminating the life of a Sangha and kind of demystifying it for us, which I found very inspiring. And I'd really like to thank you for being this Sangha presence, especially here in the West. There's a quote from Lama Zopa Rinpoche: Dharma centres like to have Sangha members living and teaching there. This is actually very beneficial for the environment, since due to the presence of the Sangha, the lineage of the Buddha's teachings is present in the country. The presence of Sangha preserves the lineage of the Buddha's teaching and establishes the cause for others to have a precious human rebirth in the future. So it's really wonderful for a layperson like myself to be surrounded by Sangha, to have the presence of the Sangha here. I'm always really thrilled whenever the football's on and I see these maroon kind of walking past. I always think, oh, Sangha! And then it's like, oh, it's just football. But wouldn't it be fantastic? And then when there's things like the Guru Bunsong or the amazing online event yesterday of this incredible, a real Sangha jewel, is really quite amazing. So for us lay people, how we can support our Sangha, of course, is to just say hello, Venerable, whenever we can. And we can always make offerings in kind of socks and soap, I hear, you know, the consumables, or at pujas offering a red envelope. All the proceeds from today are going into our Langri Tangpa Centre Sangha Fund. And so that is a fund there that can support our Sangha if there's an emergency, so they know they've got a safety net there, because it is quite tricky to be able to support yourself in the West. And of course the IMI, the International Mahayana Institute, which is really such a unique, amazing organisation, as we saw, of all of these human beings that have really blossomed in the Dharma and have been able to share their own experience like you all have, while still being very much yourselves, still being authentic human beings and being Sangha. I really find that so inspiring. So thank you so much. I look forward to the coming teachings with Venerable Lassam and meditations with Venerable Trinley, continuing teachings with Venerable Seton, and future teachings with Venerable Chösom and Venerable Gompo. So happy to hear. And I'd like to dedicate all of the merits that just by seeing the Sangha, may we have incredible imprints on our mind. May the Sangha continue until samsara is empty. And may we always be able to support our Sangha. May we live harmoniously, and may we all be able to uphold the Buddha's vow. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and happy first wheel turning day. And see you all again. Thank you, Venerable Sanghas. Woo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for organising, Miffi.
Bye.